Right, right. So one of the ones that's probably most famously eliminated was homosexuality, which was a mental illness up to 1973. So the psychiatry, people, there's a thing called the DSM, which is the Bible of psychiatry. It's commonly called the Bible. It's published by the American Psychiatric Association, which is the Guild of American Psychiatrists. And the DSM stands for Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We're up to DSM-5 right now, so they revise it every 15, 20 years because it gets criticized all the time every time they revise it, so they try to make it more valid, more reliable. They always fail, and we can talk about that later. But up until up in DSM-2, homosexuality was still a mental illness, and psychiatry really what they thought in the 1940s, 1950s, that to be a progressive was to be somebody who no longer viewed homosexuality as a crime or a sin, and that if we could only make it a mental illness that could be treated, that's certainly going to be a better deal for homosexuals. That was their thinking, so we'll treat it. Of course, homosexuals, they were way behind the times. They didn't realize there was all this. By the late 1960s, you had gay activism, you had Stonewall, and of course, gay activists were realizing this is no upgrade, to move us from just for being sinners to being mentally ill for our homosexuality. So they were enraged, and they protested, and they won this battle. It was one of the great battles in gay. There was a recent documentary that was put out about this called Cured, going through the whole battle about how gay activists basically intimidated, scared, frightened, did everything politically active. It was fantastic political activism. They had some insider psychiatrists who hadn't come out yet who helped them, and they won this battle to abolish homosexuality as mental illness in 1973. So part of the interesting thing for that, besides being a great victory for gay activists, was that in the 1970s it was one more nail in the coffin for psychiatry, that it was obvious to almost everybody that this is not a scientific thing. You can't get rid of cancer or diabetes by activism, right? So this must be a political thing. And so people got thinking a lot more, and that was the era where, One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest won Best Picture in 1975. There's much more critical thinking about this whole thing called psychiatry. And so it became more people thought well, maybe it's not just homosexuality that's just this political thing that's not really a valid, scientifically valid disease or disorder. Maybe all of these things are, at least a bunch of them. So that was one that got abolished. That rarely happens in the history of psychiatry. Mostly they're renamed, like things like it used to be bipolar. It used to be manic depression. Now everybody's got bipolar disorder. And ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, has gone through many, many different names. And there's more increases. So the DSM's gone. 1952 it was like that. Then each one by the 2013 DSM-5, it's like that. More and more people get pathologized. And there's a lot of incentives for it to increase, for the medicalization of everyday life, if you will. There's a lot of drug company incentives, psychiatry gets more power, but there's also other societal political incentives which we could get to.